airstrikes were carried out. On the ground, Syrians have been filming and uploading footage they say shows the explosive work of Russia's air force. And the diplomatic fireworks are continuing too. NATO's Secretary-General clearly doubts Russia's account of an incursion into Turkish airspace at the weekend as a fleeting mistake caused by bad weather.
I will not speculate on the motives. I will just reiterate or restate that this is a serious violation of Turkish airspace. It should not happen again.
The Turkish president, on a visit to NATO's home city of Brussels, also hit out at Russia's Syrian campaign.
Russia is still there. Russia at the moment is carrying out operations in Syria, and it is trying to create an airbase in Syria, and at the same time they violate our airspace. We cannot tolerate this kind of thing. NATO has taken a very tough line against this, and I am convinced that it will continue to do so. Any aggression against Turkey is an aggression against NATO.
Moscow says it's happy to work with Turkey to prevent any misunderstandings in Syria. But despite communication last week between Russian and US militaries aimed at avoiding a mishap, Washington still feels Moscow is keeping it in the dark about its operations. Nonsense, says Russia's foreign ministry at a Tuesday press conference at which she criticised the international media for an anti-Russian reporting campaign. Spokesperson Maria Zakharova also told Washington all it has to do is pick up the phone.
They can always call us and check everything in order to allay their concerns and then announce accurate and clear assessment in public. If even after these conversations, which can take place at any moment at the American side's request, you still have any concerns, you may then speak about them. But first, you should check this with us.
Despite both Russia and the US-led coalition insisting their bombing campaigns are targeting ISIL, the prospect of anything more than the merest of cooperation looks slim. Moscow says that the coalition's campaign is illegal under international law because it wasn't requested by the Syrian government. The coalition says that Russian planes are there to prop up a brutal dictator. Despite NATO warnings of a significant Russian military build-up in Syria, Moscow is still ruling out any sort of boots-on-the-ground mission. For the moment, it says it's content to fight the war from the skies. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
The President of the European Council is warning that millions more refugees could head into Europe from Syria if President Assad's government continues to receive military support from Russia and from Iran. Donald Tusk called for Europe to regain control of its external borders in a speech he gave to the European Parliament, having had talks with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Monday.
A potential victory of Assad's regime, more likely today because of Iran and Russia's engagement in Syria, will result in the next migratory wave. Yesterday, this message was confirmed by President Erdogan. According to Turkish estimates, another 3 million potential refugees may come from Aleppo and its neighborhood.
Libya's Coast Guard's taken almost 150 people off a boat heading across the Mediterranean to Europe. All of them from North Africa. They were taken to a naval base in the capital, Tripoli, where they've been given medical treatment and food by the United Nations Refugee Agency. The International Organization of Migration says more than 550,000 people have arrived in Europe across the Med so far this year. Almost 3,000 are known to have died trying to make the crossing. European Union's banned the import of dried fish, beans and other food from Nigeria after high levels of pesticide were found. Well, it hasn't gone down too well with Nigeria's government, which says the ban is disproportionate. More from Yvonne Ndege in Lagos.
These are some of the banned products on sale at the Garki market in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. They include beans, sesame seeds, melon seeds, palm oil, dried fish, meats and other products. Sani Haliru, who sells dried fish, is angry about the EU decision.
abincinmu na Najeriya ba shi da chemical.
Nigerian foods don't contain harmful pesticides. I'm inviting people from around the world to come and test and buy our food. It's organic, it's natural. If it contained harmful pesticides, it would affect us too.
The EU found that the organophosphate dichloris used by farmers as an insecticide exceeded the community's legal limits.
It was an unfortunate incident and also was blown out of proportion because of some challenges that occurred within our supply chain back home.
Nigeria's Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, known as NAFDAC, is trying to detect where the foods with high pesticides are coming from. But it's a huge challenge. Every year, Nigeria's food safety agencies test about 2,000 random samples of food for high pesticide levels. But their tests are a tiny fraction of what's consumed locally and exported. And they're dependent on food producers to voluntarily bring in samples for testing. Scientists here blame corrupt food producers.
Many exporters circumvent these processes and many times export without passing through NAFDAC. And sometimes when they even pass through NAFDAC, they kind of subdivide the products, meaning the batch that NAFDAC tested may not be the ones that are contaminated.
The ban is bad news for traders like Sani. It's also bad news for Nigeria. It wants to boost exports of agricultural products rather than relying solely on income from oil sales. The ban will stay in place until June next year. In the meantime, more products will be tested to determine the source of the contaminant. Yvonne Dege, Al Jazeera, Lagos.
The head of Volkswagen's given the first hint that jobs may have to go after the diesel emissions scandal. Matthias Müller warned that changes at Germany's biggest car maker would not, in his words, be painless. New figures have shown that sales in South Korea, which is one of Volkswagen's biggest markets for diesel, have gone down by almost 8% in the last month. Europe's highest court has struck down a transatlantic data deal used by companies such as Facebook to send people's personal data to the US. The Safe Harbor Agreement, which the US and European Commission reached in 2000, was found to be not sufficiently able to guarantee the personal data of Europeans. And now those companies, any others in fact that do the same thing, must find other ways to operate or face legal and financial penalties. More from Paul Brennan.
Every day, billions of dollars of electronic business is conducted between the United States and Europe. Legal contracts, personal data, commercial deals and social media, all supposedly protected by a transatlantic privacy agreement called Safe Harbor. Now, though, the European Court of Justice has decided that Safe Harbor can't be trusted.
It impacts all aspects of business. Personal data is essentially anything from which a living individual can be identified. So that ranges from something as simple as an email signature block to details in a library database, for example.
In 2013, former CIA contractor Edward Snowden leaked classified documents revealing the sheer scale and intrusiveness of covert snooping by US intelligence agencies. It was those revelations which prompted campaigner Max Schrems to bring this case to the European Court. Schrems focused on Facebook, which has its European HQ in Ireland, but transfers users' data to servers outside the EU. Whether it's the digital photographs that we put on our social media websites, our credit card details, or indeed multi-million-dollar business deals, all of that data has to be stored on servers such as this. And more often than not, they're not here in the European Union, they're sited in the United States. Now, under the Safe Harbor Agreement, America promised to match the European Union's privacy rules. But what's become clear and is now acknowledged by the European Court is that America's spy agencies routinely override and ignore European privacy rules. Safe Harbor is worthless. Facebook insists it has done nothing wrong and operates within current laws. The company declined an interview request but issued a statement saying it is imperative that EU and US governments ensure that they continue to provide reliable methods for lawful data transfers and resolve any issues relating to national security. Alternatives to Safe Harbor include such things as model contracts, binding corporate rules, or our own consent for data to be transmitted. Of course, another solution would be to make the US spy agencies more accountable.
If I get spied on by the NSA, there is no way for me to go to the US and bring a private action against the NSA. There just isn't an avenue for that in the US. That, the ECJ says, that's fundamentally imbalanced. So if the US can reform their Privacy Act, they've had one since the 1970s, so that I as a European citizen can have some rights of action under that legislation, well, that levels up the playing field across the Atlantic. And you can see that would be one way. And that's going to be enormously controversial down in the US.
Under current EU rules, companies which contravene privacy face financial penalties running to seven-figure sums. And new rules are on the way which would impose fines of up to 5% of companies' global turnover. This European ruling will spark a scramble to find new ways of doing business. Paul Brennan, Al Jazeera.
More than 200 new species have been found in the Himalayas. I beg your pardon. It's been described as a unique treasure house. It also turns out, as well as being home to Mount Everest, to have a walking snakehead fish that can survive on land for 4 days. Plants, fish, amphibians, invertebrates, reptiles and birds, all of them never seen before, were discovered. Go to aljazeera.com for a great deal more.